I would like to call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education is on Tuesday, May 26th at 7:30 p.m. For the chairperson's report tonight, I wanted to give an update on the fiscal 27 budget process for the Board of Education. In their meeting last night, the RTM voted to approve the Board of Education's proposed operating budget of $130,179,922, representing an increase of 3.51% over last year. The RTM also approved the Board of Education capital budget of $1,551,000. Thank you very much to the Board of Finance, RTM F&B Committee, RTM Education Committee, and to all of the RTM members for your ongoing support of our schools and capital needs. I would also like to recognize and thank State Representative Tracy Murrah for her proactive leadership in introducing House Bill 5327, which officially passed the General Assembly last week to become state law. Thank you also to Dr. Byrne for your advocacy on behalf of our students and schools during this legislative session. This legislation aims to improve the hiring process for school employees by enhancing disclosure requirements and will provide a critical layer of protection for children in schools across Connecticut. Thank you. Now we'll move on to public comment.
Good evening. If you would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and town of residency and note that you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have no public comment at this time.
Thank you. We'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening and thank you for joining us for the May 12th Board of Education meeting. I'd just like to echo Robin and her comments about the budget. I'm incredibly grateful to our Board of Education, my colleagues in administration, the Board of Finance, RTM Education Committee, RTM Finance and Budget, and the overall RTM for their collaborative efforts and steadfast support throughout the process. This morning, I attended the CABE 2026 legislative wrap-up in Hartford. It was an opportunity to learn about changes in legislation from the most recent legislative session that ended last week. We are officially in the heart of hiring season and looking forward to welcoming prospective candidates to our job fair tomorrow. We'll be having here from 4 to 6 at Central Office. And congratulations to the Hindley chess team for taking first place overall in the NECA chess tournament on Sunday, May 3rd. Over 100 students from 17 schools participated in the competition. And we've heard this a lot this year, their incredible run. Congratulations to the Middlesex Quiz Bowl team. Not only did our A team make an amazing run to be a national semifinalist, but our B and C teams also finished in the top 20. It is the first time since 2013 that 3 teams from one school have finished in the top 20. It's also the first time in our program's history that every team that we brought to nationals qualified for the playoffs. Good luck at your next competition in Orlando. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to student representatives report.
Hi, everybody. So very exciting. AP tests are almost over, with a few more later this week. We also have a band and jazz ensemble concert this Thursday, May 14th. Senior prom is coming up Saturday, May 16th. And sadly, we soon say goodbye to the seniors this Friday, but luckily they're moving on to their amazing spring internships.
Thank you, Kylie. Now we're going to move on to presentations, discussion, and possible action. The topic is special education and student services, trends and strategic priorities with Ms. Shirley Klein and Dr. McCarthy presenting. Ms. Klein, please.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the board. Dr. Byrne, students, hi Kylie, parents, colleagues, and the Darien school community. I'm accompanied this evening by Dr. Scott McCarthy, Director of Special Education and Student Services, K through 12, and Laura Straighton, Program Director for the Early Learning Program, for our presentation on trends and strategic priorities. This evening's presentation provides an overview of the district's special education trends, our operational demands, compliance responsibilities, and strategic priorities in special education and our student services. Within the overview, we will be providing information regarding our classification rate, enrollment trends, operational information, and about the facilitation of PPT meetings, updates regarding collaboration between the SES department and the MTSS committees, and professional learning updates. Okay. Totally. District trends. So you can see my technology skills have really improved in the last 11 years. Cass said to me, "Nice, are you going to drive this yourself tonight?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." Thank you, Jeff.
Don't know what happened.
Yeah, it hopped out.
Well, Jeff's been behind, it probably was the user, but he's been behind. It wasn't? Okay.
So it's.
Oh, no, that's just statement.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. District trends. This section introduces district-wide trends, data that's related to enrollment, identification, service delivery, and of course, programming. Data trends help contextualize staffing, our budgeting, program development, and of course, compliance responsibilities. The following data trends include state, local, cohort, and longitudinal data, which we monitor closely as they reflect larger systemic patterns that of course impact our staffing, caseloads for teachers, programming, and our professional learning recommendations. The number of students with IEPs has remained relatively stable over the past 3 years. And as you can see, after a significant increase was noted between the 2022-23 and 2023-24 school years. To provide further context for you regarding our enrollment data, we've provided the enrollment by year and by level. The data represents an increasing enrollment trend within ELP. And if you note, it'll be the most significant increase occurred between 2023-24 and 2024-25 school years when the state changed the entrance age for kindergarten. The enrollment at the elementary level has increased each year until this current school year, when it has remained about the same. The numbers of students at MMS has increased this year due to a large incoming class in our grade 6. And we do anticipate a slight increase again next year as the current grade 5 is relatively large. At the same time, please note the high school enrollment of students with IEPs has decreased, and that's been a result of a very large graduating class last year. When we look at our cohort comparison by grade, the data provides important information about trends in grade level classification of students with IEPs. The most significant change in eligibility, if you note, exists between grades 2 and 3, with an increase of 16 students noted. To see this within the bar graph, please note the light blue bar in grade 2, which represents 60 students have IEPs in grade 2, and that was on October 1st, 2024. Now, please note the same cohort within the dark blue bar in grade 3, which now represents 76 students who now have IEPs in grade 3 as of October 1, 2025. And we're currently analyzing this trend with our colleagues at multiple levels within our MTSS data, as well as our intervention with planning teams. When we look at educational classifications, this graph represents the educational classifications of students with IEPs within the district through 2023-24 school year. Learning disability and other health impairment continue to represent the largest disability categories. And of note, autism rates have increased over time, which is consistent with broader statewide and national trends. We did want to indicate under other disabilities, some of the areas that are included in the orange other disability line are visually impaired, orthopedically impaired, hearing impaired, et cetera, medically fragile. In our 5-year comparison of the Durgay classification rates, thank you. It's there. In our Durgay classification rates, this graph represents a 5-year comparison of IEP classification rates across local districts that have comparable demographic variables. As you can see, all Durgay districts' identification rates have increased over the past 5 years, and Darien does continue to be the highest, with Ridgefield second. Our out-of-district placement IEPs represents the number of students by level attending out-of-district placements as recommended by the PPT over the past 5 years. Out-of-district placements have remained relatively stable overall, with the highest concentration at the secondary level and the largest increasing trend noted for students with transition needs. This table represents unilateral parent placements, the number of students by level.
It advanced too far.
This table represents the number of students by level with unilateral placements by agreements over the past 5 years. These trends you will note at the secondary level reflect the increasing complexity of students' mental health and therapeutic needs for specialized programs. And if you note in year 6 through 8 and 9 through 12, you have 17 students and 28 students that are in that cohort. I'll turn it over to Scott, and he'll speak about PPT meetings and regulations and their impact on staffing and student programs.
Thanks, Shirley. So as part of this presentation, we were asked to give some context and information about the number of PPT meetings that are held in the district each year. To kick us off, we're going to give a little bit of context to the procedural regulations that require these meetings to occur before we go into the numbers. So the reason that the district holds PPT meetings is federally regulated and also codified within the Connecticut state regulations. And it's the central decision-making process for all special education decisions. Notably, in the last few years, the timelines and the procedural requirements have continued to expand in complexity. And those have been things that have been requiring increasing demands on our teams. No. Okay. In terms of our requirements, we're of course required to hold timely, compliant, collaborative PPT meeting processes, and then an essential component of this process is that parents are meaningful participants in the process. There are numerous procedural reasons that we hold PPT meetings, and all of them have prescribed timelines to them. If the district fails to comply to those timelines or fails to comply to the appropriate procedures, that can result in citations from the state, that can result in state complaints being filed, corrective actions, and potential claims by any individual who is impacted by those failures. In terms of PPT membership, there's a federal regulation that requires a multidisciplinary team to participate in the meeting because interdisciplinary collaboration is considered essential to the process. But as you can imagine, as the student becomes more complex, so does the PPT meeting membership. And that typically becomes more specialized in terms of participation. In terms of the types of meetings, some of our PPT meetings are centered on the evaluation processes, and some of them are centered on progress reviews. Those are the two main buckets of PPT meetings. In addition, there are a number of other types of procedurally required PPT meetings that often occur in the context of a crisis, an emergency, or discipline. Before we get into the numbers of the PPT meetings that exist in the district, we did want to provide some context to what the baseline level would be. So all students who have an IEP must have had an initial referral to PPT. that then result in an eligibility determination meeting that will happen after that. And then any student who qualifies to have an IEP must have an annual review once per year. And every 3 years, the district must convene a meeting to reconsider whether that student is eligible for special education. So that's the baseline minimum that we must convene for every student who has an IEP, sorry. So when we look at our projections and with that baseline in mind, given that we have 949 students in the district with IEPs, the baseline level of PPT meetings that we would convene each year would be 1,656 PPT meetings. That would include annual reviews, 3-year evaluations, and then utilizing our average initial referral rate over the past 5 years at 4.25%. And those referrals require 2 meetings, the initial referral and then the eligibility determination. So that would be the baseline that we would be able to have during this current school year. And then when we look at our actual trends, we want to provide this in the context of the administrative restructure that the board committed to recently. And we know that an impetus for that restructure was the number of PPT meetings that were demanding facilitation by our secondary administrative team. So we provided the number of PPT meetings by level in addition to the number of administrators per building level who are facilitating those PPT meetings and what that ratio looks like. So we can see that except for the exception in ELP, which is the highest, it trends upwards per level. And that runs in sort of an inverse relationship to the amount of time, like the length of each meeting. So our elementary school meetings typically are longer than our middle school meetings, which are typically longer than our high school meetings. And that's for an important reason. So most of our elementary families are new to the PPT process. And we have, as I said before, we have a procedural requirement to ensure meaningful participation for those families. And so part of that is in making sure they understand the process and that they are afforded opportunities to ask questions about the procedural components. And our families are an engaged community, and that's good for kids. So so this is sort of to be expected. The out-of-district PPT meetings are typically either facilitated by Shirley or me, or in collaboration with a special education administrator at the building level, and are typically the most complex as the students have the most comprehensive profile that we have in the district. And then of course, we're collaborating with an out-of-district school that may operate with a different schedule. So as you can imagine, as we just showed you data explaining that the number of students with IEPs has increased over the school, the preceding 5 school years, that has resulted in increased demand regarding facilitation and participation by our administrators and our certified staff. And so we've looked at multiple ways that we could try to establish efficiencies and also still be in compliance and make sure that we're facilitating these meetings with fidelity. So some of those processes have included scheduling meetings so that they can be combined. That requires a lot of proactive efforts to make sure that if we're conducting an annual review, we may also be able to plan for the 3-year evaluation at the same time, so we don't need to come back. This decreases redundancy for the process and also increases efficiency for families and teams. Designing systems and structures for us to get information to parents ahead of time so that meetings can be used to make big decisions and not to be reviewing content in the same way. And then also professional learning. So we've been working with our administrative teams to provide professional learning on effective meeting facilitation strategies to make sure that we're ensuring that the meeting works for the student. Another demand that has resulted from an increased number of students with IEPs in the district is the evaluation process. So evaluation is a central component of both determining eligibility and planning for students' programs. And as you can see from these data, we complete a lot of evaluations in the district. So every initial evaluation is presented here by level, in addition to the parenthetical reference to the students who are qualified from that evaluation process. We've completed 291 reevaluations through the 3-year evaluation process. And in addition to that, we've completed target assessments at a level of 132 in the district to date. Target evaluations could look like psychiatric evaluations. They could look like an OT evaluation, a specific thing that we're looking to target about the student to collect more information for program planning. And we also wanted to provide you some data regarding the service delivery that exists within the district. As you can see, there's an extensive instructional and related service support model that exists. The preponderance of our service delivery model in specialized instruction is at the resource room and learning center level. At the secondary level, we have our co-taught classes are the primary source for inclusion for students. And this is the highest at the 6th grade level, where we have 2 English classes. So you see that students have a third opportunity to participate in a co-taught class. And our related services represent a fairly comprehensive structure, which represents some significant staffing commitments as well. In the appendix, you can see the breakdown by elementary, middle, and high school if you're interested in seeing a greater detail level. Thanks, guys. Okay, so in the spring of last school year, we presented to you our K-5 identification rate self-study that we worked on in collaboration with the curriculum instruction team. And one of the things that
Scott had skipped a whole bunch of slides, it looks like.
Sorry.
Yeah, that should be the next one.
Not doing anything.
They're never gonna let me sit up here again.
It's really because of proximity to me, so. I never do the technology right, so see what happens by osmosis.
To trying to do a hard reach. Sorry. I can't get it to restart. Jeff, please.
I think we can go ahead and, if everyone has the slides on there, they can just speak to them, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's, I think it's important to look at the nexus between the generated from the self-study goals and where we are, and then we'll catch up with that, if that's okay with the board.
Is YouTube working?
YouTube is working.
Yeah, this computer's not affected.
Okay.
This one isn't. It's just the presentation computer that's affected.
Is the stream,
Yeah, the stream is fine. It's still going.
so it's streaming to.
Yeah, it's just this, the presentation.
Maybe we can maybe we can give them a moment to, and maybe take some questions for what's been presented so far. With that, any interest in that? Do questions on what's been covered so far, and give our team here a few moments to, please pardon the technological issue. I'm so sorry.
It's fine. And if you need my assistance, I'll do that.
The work-
You might need it. You have a flashlight.
I do have.
No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you want to open it up for some questions
Yeah,
on what has been
Yeah.
covered so far?
yes, let's open up to questions from the board on what's been presented so far.
So I have a couple questions. These are just more, just on some of the graphs and the slides that are a little bit more basic maybe, but on the educational classification slide, can you just explain the
Sorry,
learning
Robin, could you
disability?
just mention the slide number?
Sorry, I'm looking, it's on page 6 of the presentation. On the
The
educational.
district data trends educational
Oh, wait, did I get the right
classification,
one?
slide 6.
Is
This
that
one,
not the
Rob?
right slide? Yes, that one.
Yeah, slide
Is that
6.
Slide 6 of the actual PowerPoint presentation.
What's the page number in the deck?
6.
6.
No,
It's
it's
page
different.
10 in the deck.
Thank
It's
you.
slide 6 on the presentation.
Can you just give a little information on, I was just looking at the two that were the highest, which was learning disability and other health impairment, and just explain some of what is included in each of those, because those tended to be the highest that we experience as a district.
So I'll start with learning disability. That would include children who have a specific learning disability. Either it includes in literacy, in mathematics, in written language, dysgraphia. Also, there also is a specific learning disability specific to dyslexia as well. In the other health impairment, which has consistently been one of our highest classification rates as well, that can include attention deficit disorder. It can include other areas. It can go from, it can also have depression, anxiety, other areas that impair a student's ability to access because of an emotional need as well. And also kind of a medical fragility piece as well.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other question on the unilateral placement and the IEP trends. Did the IEP trends include out-of-district students? And I'm trying to remember what exact slide. I wasn't sure about it. It wasn't really labeled.
The unilateral parent or the IEP placements by level?
So the IEP placement by level would be on page 9 of the slide deck. And that one speaks to PPT placements of students in out-of-district programs. And we did speak to the notion that some of them, they may vary from placements based on, we noticed in the secondary, mental health reasons and different pieces of emotional social functioning as well that requires a highly therapeutic milieu.
That's okay. Why don't we open it up to other questions? I'll just find the
Okay.
slide while other people might have questions. Sarah?
Thank you. So I know that Fitch is considered a DHS program, but I'm curious about the population, the number of students that are there now and the trends of that, where you see that improving or increasing, decreasing. Is it stable? Just curious what that looks like.
So I don't want to guess on the number of students that have IEPs. Several students have IEPs in the
Right.
program. We have a full-time psychologist there, and we have a full-time special education teacher. Rebecca's there to address their needs. I would have to see the exact number of students with IEPs
But
there.
the enrollment grows, it's grown quite a bit this year. Rich, do you know how many students are enrolled at Fitch at this
I think we
moment?
have 16 students. I think we're at 16.
I was gonna say 18, but
Okay.
it started low, but
Yeah, it started lower, but
I
it's
think we're at
definitely grown
16.
to a full group of.
Yeah. But I would check on the number of IEPs, students with IEPs there. But I believe it's at 16 or 18.
Katie?
Thank you. Yeah, just to piggyback a little bit on what Sarah's saying, it would be great to have a component of either this presentation to talk about Fitch or a standalone. And, you know, to that point, like the only thing that I think is actually even mentioned about Fitch in this is it is included in the count for the high school. And I was looking, this is not for now to be answered at this table, but I think something that would be a great consideration too is as we're thinking about our website and our classifications, I know we've talked about this in the past about where special education falls. And I was looking today and Fitch doesn't appear anywhere on our page. And even if you search for it, it only comes up in a meeting material. But if you do a Google search, it is a page in the website. And special education is actually really buried. You actually have to go into, I don't even remember off the top of my head. I think it's under departments and then something else. So I'd love to see us, making this information more accessible broadly. I think that it would be really great, even some of the things that you guys were just talking about. I hope that we can get to a level where we can be talking, and I should start by saying, thank you so much for your presentation. This is drastically different than it has been in the past. And I can tell that you guys really are focusing on what's going in our schools and the trends and understanding more of the profiles of our student, which is exactly the conversation I want to be having. So I'd love to see us develop a bit of a special education 101 for the website and, especially for the board. That way we're all coming to this, and the community as well can come with that base level understanding. So you don't have to explain that a PPT is mandated every year federally, right? So that way we can, I think, just have a bit better conversation. And then on Robin's question about the classifications and for SLD specifically, specific learning disability. I know we've been talking about this for a couple of years, and I know that the state platform lags behind what we want. However, I would really, really love to see us make that a priority to do the manual work and understanding what the breakdown of that classification is. So that way, specifically the dyslexia population. And I think that will provide us some really valuable information as we look at what are our classification rates, what are our outplacement rates, and how does this tie back to our curriculum changes, which has really just been a major focus for the district. So, whatever it needs to be, whether it is taking count of by case managers, by PPTs at the end of the year to get that sense of a number of what is comprising SLD and OHI, I think that would be really helpful.
And and that has come up several times, Katie. We can do that manually.
Yeah.
We can ask the case managers with their students on their caseload to identify what area in the SLD it is or OHI.
Just let me know what day that is. I'll bring coffee and cookies.
Thank you.
Just to add to that too, though, one of the complexities, just to give some context, and I agree, we can do the manual work, is that because in Connecticut, which is different than in some states where you can have a primary disability and a secondary disability, we can only select one primary.
Mhm.
There are students who have ADHD and a specific learning disability, and that student wouldn't be captured in the manual work too. So it is a little challenging when we're working with small sets of numbers to make comparisons year over year, but I do think we could do the work to understand what the trends look like and hopefully get some information from
And the cookies will be well received.
that.
Joanna?
I wanted to go back to the PPTs. So you said like minimally, we would have 1,650 plus PPT meetings. But already this year, or as of April 24th, we've had 2,060. So, and we know some of these referrals hopefully will lessen over time when MTSS is really, we learned that from the self-study last year. Our preventative work is not as strong as it needs to be. What other types of meetings are these PPTs? I'd love to know how many are second or third or fourth meetings that parents are calling because they don't feel like their students' needs are being met. Of those meetings, I'd love to know how many were originally on Zoom or stayed on Zoom. I would love to know how many missed services are usually associated with these repeat meetings. I feel like there's just some cracks in the system that is leading us to do more of an administrative work, that if we could fill in those cracks, the number of PPTs would go down.
And-
Sorry,
and,
John.
Just to comment on that, and it's a good question, and I think we could do some work to provide some context around that. The minimum projection, though, we would never expect it to be at that minimum because we would expect, for example, we will hold manifestation determination meetings during the school year, which are meetings that come as a result of discipline. But we can't project a minimum, right? Because they happen when they happen. Every time a student is psychiatrically hospitalized, we have to convene a PPT meeting by law. We can't project a minimum standard. So a lot of those meetings that are above and beyond that minimum standard aren't necessarily a reflection of a different process not running efficiently. It's a reflection of there are other procedural processes that we can't project. They just occur. So I think what we could do is maybe break out, to your point, which of these are repeat meetings versus which of these are actually just other procedural items that need to happen.
Right, and what those could look like, what
Yeah.
that means.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just great.
Thank you.
So
John.
just 2 points. One quickly on that note, do you track the amount of man hours that go into these meetings?
We don't track the number of hours. And there's variability. I know that was another question also. Some of the meetings can, and depending again, as Scott mentioned, if it's elementary or secondary, an elementary meeting can go for an initial meeting for 90 minutes. And also on a triennial, depending on the evaluations that are conducted, it could also be an hour and a half, 90 minutes. The annual reviews might be shorter because you're not reviewing all the evaluations, but we don't actually track the number of minutes.
But you do have the data though, I assume, from
No.
meeting invites, would that be?
Well, the meeting invites, but sometimes it goes over the meeting invite, but the meeting invites would give you an
But
idea
roughly, you could
of
track
a
that.
start and end, but it may go
That
over.
would probably be helpful too to have. And then just going back, just kind of talking about the trends, maybe specifically, slide 8 in the presentation or PDF page 14. You talk a lot about trends, but it seemed just to kind of be more reading of the data. So what the data is versus I didn't find a lot of why these trends exist. So could you just explain to me here, why is Darien above the other locations listed here for 2 separate time slots or time periods?
So one of the things that I think is really important about this graph, and we presented this in the 24-25 Board of Ed report, is that this trend has actually existed since 2012-13, that Darien was the highest in the DERG. And so trying to understand, there's a multitude of factors that could result in a district having a high eligibility classification rate. And that high classification rate existed before all of us worked here. So it's not easy to really opine on the exact reason why. I don't know that we could identify the exact reason why. It is a long-standing trend. In 2012-13, we were about 10% over the next highest district. You can see that today we're closer in line with some of these districts. The trend we can see is that everyone has gone up. But as to the why, that could look very different by district.
But I just don't feel like that's an answer.
Well, I'm sorry, wouldn't you say last year your self-study really
I'm
delved
gonna-
into the reason? Okay, thank you.
So I don't know if you saw that, Mr. Dunn, but last year, we pointed that out in our self-study, which is why we had a self-study, was exactly to find out why there is a high classification rate. And in that self-study, which is posted on our website, but I guess it's not that easy to get to. But in our self-study, it does show why we're looking into the idea that, and our collaboration for MTSS, that are we looking at our pre-referral and our interventions prior to referral to special education. So I think what our commitment that's begun this year also is that we're looking at why we have a high classification rate. And one of the outcomes, and I'll speak to it in our professional learning, is to look at a rigorous and didactic and specific reading program, which is what Interreading brought in, and why we're doing OG. So if the short answer to your question is, our understanding was we needed to really look at effective methodologies and strategies for literacy instruction in our early years. And that's precisely what our MTSS and our collaboration with SES is doing now. You won't see a decline based on that area for a couple of years as we're implementing the program. But you will see a capacity and agency of teachers to be able to utilize multisensory reading approaches and the new reading program. And we're confident that that should impact our student performance, and thus we hope to look at a reduced classification rate in the area of literacy.
So were the other districts doing that, then we just weren't? But again, that's just a forward-looking approach versus looking at the data. going back.
Actually, New Canaan did it several years ago. We modeled their program. They have an academy, and they started where they actually had a fellow, an OG fellow in the district who actually worked with all their general and special education teachers. And their outcomes were success for students in that implementation.
Yeah, so even on the graph that we see here, when we presented that in the self-study, one of the things we looked at was districts that have a different increase than what we've experienced, what might those districts be doing? So one of the things we shared was that Wilton has a summer MTSS program that they funded to support students in tier 2 and tier 3 to receive tier 2 and tier 3 instruction through the summer. And can we exactly point to that being the reason why they had a lower change? No, there are other things that could go into that. But at the same time, New Canaan has invested significantly in Orton Gillingham instruction over the past 5 to 10 years. And they have a similar lower increase, although it increased, but lower. So it's, I don't know that we can say it's causal, but what we're trying to look at is what are we seeing in the difference between the districts that have smaller increases?
And also New Canaan also has a very, they don't call it MTNS, I think they call it RTI, but they have a very strong intervention and general education program as well.
We've definitely talked with them about some of the things they have in place already, because it's helpful to us as we begin this journey.
Can I just suggest, since we have the slides up now and we're starting to talk about some of your goals that were coming out of the self-study, that we continue with the slide.
Can I
that
just
you
share one thing
stopped-
about
Yeah.
the reasoning for the higher number? We've been told in the past, John, by like anecdotally through realtors and whatnot, that people choose to move to Darien because of whether it's ELP or the perceived reputation of our district. So I think there's a higher percentage of people moving into town that may require services than any other.
Why don't we ask more questions after he's finished? Because I think we're starting to get into a lot of what you were about to cover, Scott, that was on page 21 of the presentation. The shared goals generated from the self-study.
So these shared goals were presented as a conclusion to the self-study work that we completed in the spring. And as you'll see, or as I remember, a majority of the action items are collaborative, increasing the collaboration between the SES department and the MTSS committees toward establishing shared information, data collection, and then collaboratively revising our processes as we move towards the implementation that's going to happen. And so the primary focus in the area has been improving consistency in our referral processes, our eligibility practices, using that cross-departmental collaboration process. And we've been really excited to partner with Dr. Fedigan and Dr. Falcone and the curriculum leadership through our department's participation in the MTSS district leadership team, the MTSS steering committee, and then also the building-based MTSS teams where special educators are represented meaningfully in all of those committees. And we're really looking forward to that revision cycle that's now happening and the implementation of a revised structure next year that improves the systems and processes of our tiered interventions. So that's it's been an exciting process to have worked through that self-study together and to now be actually seeing that work happen throughout this school year.
Do you want me to advance?
Scared to touch it. Okay. So again, this is really premature data, but it's information that we want to be providing to you yearly so that you know that we're monitoring it and we're looking at it. The specific learning disability category is the category that we're traditionally talking about when we're talking about MTSS processes and the relationship between the MTSS process and special education eligibility. And what we can see is the numbers have been fairly stable. There's a slight decrease noted this year. It's not necessarily a trend yet, but it's something that we can see and we'll be continuing to monitor collaboratively with our MTSS teams. This is also in some ways consistent with the overall state data. So when we look at the state data, the percentage of students overall who have an identification of a specific learning disability has increased in the last 5 years, while the percentage of students with specific learning disabilities within the population of students who have IEPs has maintained fairly consistent or increased slightly, as we've just seen this one slight decrease this year. And last, we wanted to provide you an update on our expanding training partnerships through the Connecticut Psychology Consortium. This is a partnership that we have that we're excited about, that we've been working really collaboratively with Dr. Gadd In a group of 4 agencies, us being the only traditional public school setting, we had 2 very high quality and well-trained school psychology interns. The school psychology interns are able to conduct evaluations. They're able to do basically anything a school psychologist can do under the supervision of a school psychologist. And so they can complete evaluations, they can conduct direct service, they can complete indirect services, they can participate in PPT meetings. And so there's been really a 2-way learning experience where we've been able to benefit from the professional learning that they have access to and the recent training that they've received. And also they've been able to really benefit us because school psychology as a certification is a national shortage area. And, we had 3 maternity leaves this year. We can never cover them. And they were able to fully cover them without us having a problem. So it's been a really beneficial experience for them to be able to be getting really high quality training and supervision here, and also an opportunity to actually practice as we've had these opportunities for them to be more independent. And I will now turn it back to Shirley to provide some information about our professional learning updates.
Okay, professional learning update. Next, we'd like to provide a brief update on 2 of our strategic priorities. One is specialized reading instruction, as we spoke about earlier, and the behavior consultation model. And this might better answer your question, Mr. Dunn, also as I go through specialized reading instruction. So if you look at some of our professional learning for this year, I'll just give you an overview of the district continues its commitment to providing specialized professional learning that's aligned with student needs. Throughout this school year, we have collaborated with the Curriculum and Instruction Department to increase the capacity and agency of our general and special education teachers, as well as our administrators. And we monitor their implementation of Orton Gillingham reading instruction. And just as a brief overview, Orton Gillingham instruction is a direct, explicit, multi-sensory structure that's sequential, it's diagnostic, and it's a prescriptive way to teach literacy. It's practiced as an approach. It is not a method, a program, or a system. And clearly, this aligns with our commitment to Tier 1 intervention in the Jones Education classroom of our interreading program, where all our teachers, both general and special education teachers, are trained in that, and we're excited to continue the work in 2026-27. And if you look at the attributes of the interreading program, which also looks at phonology, morphology, written language, and the other very, very multisensory areas that are essential to developing good readers and good writers. I won't go through all that, but just to let you know, and I know I did mention it earlier on, Dr. Byrne at one of our presentations, but our training for our special education teachers is mandatory. We've met this year. We have 23 elementary school teachers that participated in general education this year, and we have 20 special education teachers who are participating in either practicum 1 or 2. And just to give some color to that also, is they all start with a 5-day training course. They'll have to repeat that again this year. The phase 1 to become an associate level is you have 2 years of practicum and you are supervised and monitored by an Orton Gillingham fellow that we contract with. She comes in, records lessons, gives you feedback on the lessons, and you're really coached to make sure that you are implementing it with fidelity and to look at student outcomes. So 10 of our teachers in special education started their practicum this year. They'll finish year 2 next year. We will have 10 teachers who are associate level upon success. And next year we'll start our cohort 2. And in 2027-28, at the end of that year, they will have completed their practicum as well. So at the end of it, we hope to have 20 special education teachers on the associate level. And also as new teachers are hired, as other teachers exit, they'll be mandated to participate in that as well. Behavioral consultation, I know we spoke to this, and I know Dr. Byrne was a big advocate of this program also. And I think Dr. McCarthy and Dr. Dadd spoke about it at a prior presentation. So the district is committed to strengthening our function-based behavioral consultation coaching, and we mentioned Dr. Melissa Collier-Meek, we call her Dr. Mel, at Teachers College, whose work has included both professional learning for our clinicians and administrators and provides the district with an opportunity that we are able to participate in the Institute of Educational Science, which is the IES federal funded research awarded to Teachers College and UConn. Beginning next year, and we've already started the consultation, we will have 10, 2 in each building, coaches for our general education teachers to really work on the consultative model. Our psychologists have already worked this year and began last year also, I believe, with Dr. Mill.
Being
On training, beginning this year, on training and their ability to go in and support teachers. I know it came up once before in a meeting also, Katie, about does this mean more work for our general education teachers? And we spoke about they are delighted to have the agency and the capacity to really have intervention strategies. So they don't always rely on calling someone, but they're able to really address student interventions on their own. So we're looking forward to those 10 coaches coming in. And before the questions, just a note that as Scott said earlier, in our appendices, that we do have department structures. We also have the overview of our continuum of services. And we also have out-of-district continuum of services for the board and for the community to understand some programs and specialized programs our students participate in. And we also have, as Scott mentioned, some of the service trends, and they're divided by elementary, related services, our service trends in middle school, and our service trends in Darien High School. And of course, our glossary of acronyms, so the report has some meaning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you for this presentation. This is incredibly helpful, and we appreciate all the work that you've put into this. I do have a few questions just on this piece with the shared goals that we had started to touch on earlier. First of all, I know you said you have completed the self-study. So are you able at this point to share some of the trends of the building-based review of referral and cohort data, or is that going to be coming at some point in the future? Because you mentioned that on that slide.
On that slide and the one you have there, we're in the process to collect that data. It's not at an end yet. It's a year data. So from the time we started the beginning of this year to the end of this year. So we'll be looking at as we go toward the end of the year, reporting out on next year.
Great. Okay, thank you. And then we had also talked about the Orton Gillingham, which can you share a little bit, because I know that the general education teachers that are getting certified in that, are they primarily going to be used in the MTSS interventions, or are they also going to be working with the general education students as part of our literacy
So
program?
it's in the general education community. So the teachers actually, they're doing an educator level OG. We're not asking them to go and become associates, although some do want to pursue it, so I don't want to diminish that. I know Amy's looking into that.
But they would be
also.
practices support all kids.
Yes, but it'll be for all students. And the notion is it happens in tier 1, which is for all students
Right.
in the general education
Yeah.
classroom. And that's their commitment to having that training.
And I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that part of the goal in doing that would be to potentially help mitigate or give the students what they need at a much earlier age so that they can get those needs met as
Right.
opposed to being referred to a higher level of support. Is that
Correct.
And that's
correct?
why tier 1 intervention is where you
Right.
want to start with OG training for that reason
It
precisely.
will take time to
Right.
see if it has that impact, but that's certainly the theory, and it should.
And is that similar to what New Canaan and Wilton have done with their programs, or have you a sense
I
of that?
certainly believe in with New Canaan, they've done a lot of work around that. But
Great.
I don't know as much about what Wilton has done.
They have an ongoing fellow there. Actually, one of their teachers went and became a fellow. It takes about 7 years to become a fellow, just to give you an idea. And some of the most highly qualified reading contractor personnel we work with are not necessarily fellows. So having a fellow on that level that we can contract with, it will be ongoing, and we'll come to the board every year to ask for that as well.
Great. Thank you. Are there other board questions? Joanna?
Just going back in the order from the last thing you spoke about. I'm very pleased to see the Prime service coming in. And I'm just wondering, how are you going to track the effectiveness of this? We hear anecdotally a lot of behavior issues in the classroom, in the hallways, et cetera. So it'd be nice to be able to see maybe I mean, some of these numbers, some of these things you probably may or may not be able to do. But like how many times has a school had to evacuate a classroom before you started this program versus afterwards? How have disciplinary levels gone up or down? You know, how many kids are missing recess before versus after? You know, I don't know if any of that's possible, but I think it would be very helpful to see.
So, in terms of the data that will come from the prime study, one benefit of being part of a study, of course, is that there's a lot of data that's collected, and so we'll be able to get a lot of information on that individual level. The way that the intervention is designed and what they're looking to study is by selecting a general education student who the teacher has targeted as a student who does require general education intervention, but does not yet have an IEP.
Okay.
Can, by providing expert consultant to the teacher and building the capacity of the teacher, by teaching them the skills needed for that student in a function-based way, and then tracking the progress of that intervention success, can we intervene successfully on that student? And also, does this teacher then maintain the capacity that we've built? So they're looking at studying that. And so that will be kind of at an individual level of 2 tutors per building, which of course has the capacity to start building out, because we're also doing that work with our school psychologists. We're building that capacity. So it's sort of an added bonus for us. In terms of some of the metrics you're talking about, that might be more school-wide. I don't know that that specific of a study is going to show us a change in clearing classrooms, for example, of the building, but we could talk to them about what type of building level data we might expect to see that we could present upon.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Other board questions? Yes, Bill.
Yes, hi, thank you. It's always heartening to see our PhDs and their education put to use in these studies. And appreciate it. And just a staggering amount of work. I think we talked about this at a previous board meeting, the PPTs, scheduling, the numbers are boggling. And really, I'd just like to recognize and say thank you for all that you do. But I would like to piggyback on something my colleague John mentioned. And I guess I'll start off with the PPT meeting types and the 3-year annual reviews. So it's kind of a glitch in the system, right? You have to have an annual review, and then every 3 years, you have to have a 3-year review. And as you've identified a way to combine the two. I would just think that would be kind of like a standard practice, unless the 3-year review, the legislation specifically calls out something much more in depth than an annual.
Well, 2 things happen, but thank you for the question and thank you for your acknowledgement. Well, 2 things happen. One, when we can offer an annual review and a triennial to happen at the same time when they're close. In Connecticut, which is one of 4 states, annual reviews are anniversary dates. They're anniversaries. So when you're initially classified, that becomes your annual review. We try to move them because sometimes it's not very helpful. If you're classified on October 1st, then your annual review is going to happen the following October 1st, and your new teachers have had you for 11 days.
I remember this from last time you
Right.
mentioned.
So it's not, so we do try to move them when we can, and when they are closer in dates, we can do that. So it is something we work on. When there is a close proximity between annual review and triennial, the 3-year, we do move them together, combine them. Some parents actually want them done separately because they really want to have the time to really talk about the annual review and then talk about a triennial. But also keep in mind that the reason for the 3-year reevaluation,
Yes,
formerly called a
that's the-
triennial, is to redetermine eligibility. There's a purpose in that meeting.
Yeah, so that would, yeah.
So
So
be
there's
an add-on.
testing that goes with that doesn't go typically with the annual
I
review.
remember that.
So sometimes they are separated, but just again, that we spoke about last time, whenever we can put them together, there's efficacy to that, and it's very helpful also, because sometimes it informs new goals and objectives based on the evaluations for the following year. So there's a perk to having an annual review and a 3-year reevaluation at the same time also.
And so given the staff commitment, the staff and resources devoted to this, I know John asked about man hours. Do we have any kind of like a full-time equivalent employee that's devoted to, let's say, special education first, or if you can break it out at some point to just handling these meetings? So to get an idea of like what we're paying for, what we're buying, and how we can support you better. If you need more, like, if you were able to come and tell, and maybe you are, we have, 35 FTEs devoted to nothing but doing PPT meetings and running from meeting to meeting and evaluation to evaluation, and we're drowning. Because you could look at this data and I could say, well, are they drowning? When you look at the number of meetings per, and you have a slide for it. PPT meetings per administrator. And you have a mean, which is, if you can do the annual and the 3-year review together, that's going to change that. But I mean, at the high school, 124. I mean, that to me is like your full-time job is basically just come in and conduct those meetings.
So,
So where do we sit in full-time employees devoted to this?
it's a really good question, and there are philosophical differences that districts have in how they do that. There are some school districts that have a special education administrator running every PPT meeting at their high school, every PPT meeting at their middle school, every PPT meeting for their elementary schools. And it's our philosophical belief that a majority of students with IEPs spend a vast majority of their day in our general education settings. And so our assistant principals and building administrators who know those students best and can be the best problem solvers to their teams and have relationships with their families. I think that's how we run the most efficient and effective meetings for families.
And that makes sense. Thank you. But it would still be helpful to know on an FTE basis, how much of that administrator's day then is tied up. And it will vary. It'll be different administrators. But if we had a total we could pin down, or at least get close to.
My understanding, and Marge, you might be able to weigh in on this more. We did make some structural changes and put positions in place to support PPT meetings and special education administration. So maybe if you can give a little background on that.
I think what you're talking about is when we combined the 2 central office. There used to be a 612 administrator and a K5. Now that is an assistant director of special education K through 12. Then we added an assistant principal at the middle school and 2 program directors. We made them full-time. So there were special education sort of department chairs at the middle and the high school. We made those 12 months so that they could help with the extended school year program and also manage the programs there.
I guess I'll drop it after this. It's just a more concise roll-up of what we're devoting.
We could try and pull that. We can look at that.
Because there are additional factors to it too, right? So
Yeah.
we're presenting the PPT meetings. There are also 504 meetings. And for many PPT meetings, we hold work sessions ahead of the meetings for the teams
See,
to
but that
review.
would be good to capture too,
So,
Dr.
yeah, so there will-
McCarthy.
yeah.
And if we can help you and resource you better to meet those, or are we overburdening our staff? We're here to help and support in that. And I had 1 or 2 other questions very briefly.
Bill, I'm so sorry. Robin, do you think we could maybe try to stick to topics so that we can ask all our questions about
Sure.
one
I-
topic
if
before we
someone-
switch?
Yeah, if someone, would you
Just,
have
because
something on that?
sorry, Bill, I didn't
No,
mean to
we
cut you
can
off. I
go
just
back to
thought
you, Bill.
instead of jumping
Sure,
back and
yeah,
forth.
absolutely.
So on the PPTs, I just wanted to chat a little bit about a couple of the conversations that we have started. So I think that, Joanna started by commenting that, one thing that can really help make our PPTs more efficient and more satisfactory to all parties is communication, right? So, to her point about, and what you're bringing up, Bill, too, as well, right? The communication that happens amongst the team outside of PPTs, right? Maybe those are emails and check-ins, those are phone calls. From my experience in the special education community, the people who have the most efficient PPTs and who have the most the highest satisfaction scores are the ones that are in regular contact with their team. So that way you're, it's like a report card. You're not getting to a PPT meeting and being surprised and being like, oh my God, we have all this work to do, right? You know what's going on. And when Scott mentioned something earlier about parents being able to meaningfully participate. So by having information in advance, parents are able to go through that and the meetings can be very quick, right? So I think that Everyone in special education will know there's not one clear answer. The answer is it depends for everything. It's very messy. And the reason for that is that we're talking about children, right? We're talking about complicated, nuanced beings, and they don't come in one size fits all. Just like Scott was saying, there's a lot of kids that might have dyslexia and ADHD, right? There might be a kid that has anxiety and has, something else. So to that point, I think that we need to try to really look holistically at all of these things and recognize that by improving all of our areas, that's probably where we're going to make our biggest gains, right? So when we're looking at PPTs, efficiencies, Joanna mentioned also about, well, how many are in Zoom and how many are in person, right? And just like any other business meeting you might have, the efficacy of an in-person versus Zoom, there's a trade-off, right? Zoom is convenient, in-person is connection. I also think that, to some of the questions that you were asking, John, as well about where they come from, I do think that we might be able to pull out a little more quantifiable data that maybe we haven't been tracking, and whether that is case managers or if it's special education secretaries, I think it would be a great thing to maybe think about for next year, noticing what's an annual review, right? What is that one that everyone needs to have? How many crisis events are triggering PPTs? How many are other events? How many, I think that could be really helpful for us just to even kind of look within. Additionally, I think, John, the question that you were asking about the time is kind of like, what's that standard invite time? And a lot of them can end early, a lot of them can go late, but there is kind of that automatic calendar block that goes into it, which is an easy formula to kind of say. I think something that's always like nice to remember too is that because we have a statutory responsibility for a certain number of people, to be in the room before you can even start. A lot of that comes down to the parent prerogative as well. So if there's someone who just has to be there because they have to be there and they're not relevant, the parent has an ability to excuse them, or if they've said their part. So those things can also, it's not necessarily that if it's a 45-minute, all 10 people are there for 45 minutes as well. I just think that those, again, complicated, it depends, nuances really matter in here. So that was just one 7 pieces of the previous conversations that I wanted to add to the discussion. So I'll leave it there for now.
Are there other board questions? Okay, Bill, or Greg.
Two things to help contextualize. Sarah had a good point about people moving here for the service, and that should be a feather in your cap for establishing a program people want to migrate to. But I did notice the data, and I don't understand the context. Out of district trends with IEP placement and unilateral placements. I understand what each is, but why, is there any context behind why unilateral placements are twice what IEP placements are?
So IEP placements are made by the district.
Right.
And a PBT team. And the unilateral placements are made a parent's decision, are some of the responsibilities for those and their choices of a program. And the other unilateral placements, which we have shared in the past also, Bill, are very often there's a program that we can't place a student in. A student might be coming out of a hospital setting. A student might need a therapeutic program that's not a state-approved program, a program that we have worked with. So very often, because of student need, there may have to be a parent placement because the PBT cannot recommend that program. And that sometimes happens more often with students who have a high clinical or therapeutic need. It's a residential program.
No, I understand. Okay. I'll defer that. So the last very brief one that I have is from a medical perspective. And we see from your trend charts with our DERG. What is there a, so let me back up and rephrase this. From one perspective, like I know when they do fraud investigations for Medicare fraud and things like that, they'll look at a statistical population in an area and they'll single out a particular pharmacy that's prescribing a drug for ulcers, say, at a statistically abnormal rate. And they'll say there's something going on there, maybe there's fraud and we should look at that. And I'm not implying any type of fraud here whatsoever. But what I am trying to say or ask is, from a medical perspective, are we in line, like in the general population, X% should have ADHD at this grade level? Are we above that? Are we trending above that? Are we trending below that? Are we at that?
Yeah, so, you know, when we think about the classification system that the medical model uses versus the IDEA, they do have a different standard, even though they use a lot of the same phrases. So to qualify as an individual with ADHD in the medical model, there isn't a requirement that you are not performing in school, right? So it's a different standard. So in order to qualify for an IEP, you must have one of the disabilities recognized by IDEA and have a significant educational impact. And that impact must require that you need specialized instruction from a special education teacher. And those second two prongs don't exist in every disability that's evaluated in a medical model. And so when we look at the prevalence rates of something like ADHD or dyslexia as diagnosed in a medical model versus in a school-based system, they often will look different, which is why we often compare ourselves to local districts with similar demographics to understand, are we aligned in how we're seeing?
That's very helpful. So yeah, they're two different sets of, that helps.
Even though they're using this, oftentimes using this, autism and autism, but different standard for eligibility in the two different settings.
Thank you. That's insightful. Thank you.
Scott, just one question to follow up on that. When you say we compare our kind of trends versus the other districts, do you find that we are in line, for instance, on the ADHD or the dyslexia, kind of the percentages just with other prevalence rates?
We specifically looked at specific learning disability, the
Sorry,
closest,
yeah.
and we are.
Okay,
Yeah, in that low 30s, and the prevalence rate increasing, but in the low 30s. But we
okay,
could pull those for the other numbers as well.
thank you. Greg, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question on the PPT meeting trend slide. I was just trying to read it a little bit and understand some takeaways. So what's the time period? Is this for just an annual basis, the 2060 or so meetings? That's for one, is that for a year?
That's for this school year until, I think, April 26th maybe was when we pulled it.
Yeah, April 24th. That's as of April 24th of this year.
But it's a full year or is it less than a year? Or?
Well, it's
The school year.
from the school year.
Starting August 27th.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is because I'm trying to figure out like, what's the number of meeting, is the way to do the math, like it's 2,000 meetings divided by the number of IEPs is the average number of meetings per IEP, or is it something different?
No, because,
Averages are
so
not
for
a good
example,
idea.
Yeah, it's
It's all
be-
individualized.
because of the different kinds of meetings. I don't know if that would be a helpful metric to get at.
Like but basically like my question is like, what does the distribution chart of meetings look like for students?
so
Is there a cohort that has 25 meetings a year and then most of them are one meeting a year, or is it very even across?
I would say it's for maybe the vast majority, 80% of students, they have their 3-year reevaluation. And we do have standardized processes. So at the second annual review during the 3-year period, we take consent for the 3-year evaluation so that we don't have to come back to another meeting to plan the meeting or to plan the evals. So we do have a standard process. We only go outside of that process if the student is, for example, experiencing a significant change in functioning, and we don't want to plan the evaluation right then because we need to wait and see what's going on later. So the vast majority, I would say, have the standard minimum. One metric that's interesting to look at is that we, to date, have completed 177 initial evaluations. And so that means that we've completed twice that number of meetings because every single one of those is required to have a referral meeting and an eligibility meeting, which is different than in New York, you don't have an initial referral meeting. The district sends home an evaluation form. So that can differ across spaces, but in Connecticut, there's a requirement for 2 meetings for each initial referral. So we can see certain trends connected to the reason, and we can certainly pull you know, how many meetings did we have that were manifestation determinations? How many did we have that were for other purposes outside of this process? We can absolutely pull that.
Okay, got it. And the only other thing I would say is like, in terms of thinking about the trends for the meetings, understanding how that's moving over time would also be helpful, like 1 year versus the prior year versus the prior year. It'd be interesting to see, like, sounds like you've done some things to create some efficiencies there. It'd be great to see how that's playing out.
Katie?
If we're ready to move off of PPTs, I just wanted to talk about the evaluations a little bit more.
Just one sort of question about PPTs. It'd be great. Last year you gave us numbers on who made the referrals and how many of those referrals, where they were in SRBI, and how many of those referrals were from by the school, by the parent, how many of which converted to IEPs. If you could give us updated numbers, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
So one quick one before we jump off. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, just kind of following up on what Greg said, the minimum's helpful as a floor, and I appreciate, Scott, you mentioned that, you know, we have the actual count so far, but we don't know, but there's got to be a trend line. We have to be able to see how that works out year over year to get an estimate or a projection or something like that. And I just got to echo what John and Bill have been saying, like, we need another cut on this data to get it man hours or how much time is being spent, with a full recognition that I could book a 30-minute meeting for somebody and maybe I'm out of there in 6 minutes, maybe I'm out of there in 2 hours, who knows? But like, you guys have to have some handle on where your dollars are going.
Are there other questions? Katie?
I wanted to talk a little bit about the evaluations. So the slide, I didn't take note of it. Essentially, I wanted to chat a bit about the disparity between the referrals versus the qualifications.
Which slide?
I think that's towards the beginning.
18.
Yeah, the one that I mentioned without the extra data.
Yes.
Evaluation process, it's slide 18 in the deck, slide 22 in the full. This is the MTSS slide.
Yes, exactly. So,
Right here.
right, so
That
slide,
if we implement MTSS well, you should not see the disparity between the initial evaluations and the huge difference from that and who qualified for anything.
okay, so based on that, then you're saying that because we don't have our interventions, they haven't been where we want them to go, that we are not sure if the kids need it or not, that we're jumping the gun. Like, how do you see that playing out?
What I am saying is that I think what we're building for the long term should have an impact on that disparity. So you shouldn't see of 88 kids, sorry, I jumped in on your presentation, 88 students who are being evaluated and 53 are being classified. So why that big number, the 35 in between? That's MTSS. That's the supports in tier 1 at the building level that they might not ever go to the initial evaluation because we've met the need, and whoever has put the referral in they're not even going to the referral because we're addressing the needs of the building level.
So I understand your point about what you hope this slide will show next year, but
I don't know that 1 year will have that.
fair enough, fair
And
enough.
I also think there's some communication pieces as well. The board has heard us talk about what we communicate to families. So the universal screener that we're going to provide in family reports 3 times a year, that's going to be information that people have not had historically. I have a theory that that will help. That will help parents feel that what's going on with my kid, I need to refer them to special education.
So then that point makes the assumption that these 35, using the elementary category, that those were all parent driven.
Not necessarily. It could be teacher driven as well.
Okay.
But we also have talked about how we haven't used the universal screen and data well.
Totally. So coming back to my original question,
Sorry.
what do you think is in between the number and the parenthetical? what is causing those additional referrals that are not actually turning into qualifications?
So it can be all the above that Dr. Burnham you just said. It can be parent referrals, and they're concerned because they're not seeing adequate progress with their students. It can be teachers who are making the referral and not going through an MTSS process, or it could be students who are in that MTSS process all too long, which we have noted, and Amy and I and Scott and Jen spoke about that, of looking at the duration of that time. And moving. So I think it can be all of the above. I think it can be, those could be the factors. That's the discrepancy. And I do know to Joanna's point, when we looked at the parent referrals, in one of the other things, many of those, the students did not meet eligibility, but I wouldn't limit it to just parent referrals. I think it's the other pieces that contribute to that also. MTSS, teachers or parents that feel that their students aren't achieving. And the data, also looking at benchmark data. How do we use benchmark data? How are we using our Ames web? How are we using our different data to inform evaluation?
So then Shirley.
Or not,
Right.
or not.
So then what happens? Like, again, let's stick with that 35, right? In elementary, what does that typically look like? We've gone through the process and it's been determined that a child did not meet the criteria for special education, but there was something that raised a flag. So is that then, like, are those students
So the
going
answers
in?
might be this, so let's just say out of those 35 students, it'd probably be better to go look at the 35 students and see what happened. That'd probably be a better example. However, that said, it can be that some of them did not go through an MTSS process and either the parent or the general education teacher went right to referral. Or someone outside, it could be a therapist or someone else went to that. And we do put in place an MTSS referral because they don't meet the criteria of a child with a disability under IDEA and the evaluation process, but they do require an intervention and maybe that intervention didn't happen. So that might be some of those 35 students.
Okay.
And I have to look more granularly to see that, but I
No,
would,
but that's my point, right? Is that
Yeah.
we are not just saying, nope, you're fine, and like.
right,
Yeah.
no,
Some of those students also get 504s.
right, exactly. And some of them are 504s.
So just one on 504s, I would like to request, in the past, we have had a separate presentation on 504s and the trends as well, which I thought was helpful. Because that's a whole other kind of section of students that are not included in the IEP data. That would be helpful to have. One question I had was
They
on,
are in PPT data, just so you know.
so, okay, so the 504s are not in the IEP numbers, but you're saying that the 504 data is in the PPT meeting data that's in this packet?
No,
Oh, you pulled that out. from
it is
this?
pulled out.
So this is only the IEP.
However,
data.
to Katie's point, there are several 504 meetings that occur in the district as well.
That's
And
why I
what in
think that's
addition. So to
important.
go back to the point of how much time is spent by psychologists, very often our school counselors, not our, so the school counselors usually chair the 504 meetings. And that's a different cohort of people who are taken away from their responsibilities, but it's usually school counselors, with the exception of elementary, where one of the APs typically does that. And typically it's the general education AP who does the 504 meetings. But as far as to your question earlier, distribution of meeting time is in addition to the PPT time.
Thank you. And I just had a question just again about the educational classification slide, which is page 12 of the deck, and I believe it's page 6 of the presentation. Just one question about that. Does that educational classification, do the numbers include out-of-district placements, or is it only the in-district IEPs?
Both.
It is both, because I think last year there was a footnote that it did not include OOD, like the out-of-district students. So that's why I was just wanting to confirm.
We've presented a slide in the past that has pre-K to 12 eligibility numbers that didn't include out-of-district students, but this slide does.
This one does
Yes.
include it. Okay, thank you. Right.
Just one quick follow-up question. For the out-of-district students, the placements that we've got, how, do we have any sense, and if you don't have the data, maybe we could follow up, any sense of how that compares as a percentage of our overall population of IEPs versus the DERG? Like, are we have more out-of-district placements as a percentage of the total versus the DERG or less, or is it on par?
I don't think we have the data with the other cohort, the other DERG A of how many out of district they have. I don't know if they publish it. And I think that question came up before, Greg, if they do publish their out of district data, or do they disaggregate it the way we do? I don't know. We could certainly ask at one of our DERG A meetings if they have that data.
Okay, thank you. And then, excuse me, and then I would just, one observation, I mean, I think, following up on some of the things that Bill said and others, clearly there's a ton of information in what you all have presented. I think that it's important to state, like, there's a lot of questions about all the information. I think this is the most data-heavy presentation we get as a board. And so I think it's really important to just maybe state the obvious, but board members are asking a lot of questions because we want to make sure that we're getting the best outcome for not just the parents who are involved in this, but also the students, most importantly, that the services that they're getting are incredible. We're not just checking the box with what's needed for the state, but we're actually getting truly excellent service for those students. And so I think that's why everybody around the table is asking so many questions about this, because we're really curious. We want to understand. And there's so much information, and seeing different pieces of that information can help us understand to make sure that we can help you do a better job.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Dennis?
Yeah, to that point, I think there's there's a lot of data in here and it's fantastic. But for me, I wish we could see it in different ways, like especially on slide 5, where in-district students with IEPs cohort comparison. It's very difficult to look because you have to look at grade 1 of last year and then grade 2 of this year. And I mean, for me, it'd just be simpler to see percentage increase of grade 1 from last year. There could be a better way. But I think my main question or comment is where I'm struggling is because we have the students in class and we're trying to parse this data to the infinite level, are we barking up the wrong tree? I mean, getting more and more data when things are in the classroom, I think we need to look at the classroom and not so much individual special education data.
Well, I think we are doing that. We're doing it at the same time. We're not doing that in tonight's presentation.
But again, going deeper and deeper into the data and asking for, how many, I don't know that that's going to get us the answer we need.
Right, but the presentations we've had about all of the work we're doing in literacy and on assessment throughout the course of the year, that's going to get us to that. So that the message is that pretty much every meeting we've had this year is directly connected to what we're working on for all of our students, including our special education students. So the MTSS presentation, you hear a lot of things. There are a lot of indications of ways that an improved MTSS process will help us and help us better support our community. That will be reflected in this down the road at some point. As we continue that work. The efforts in literacy, we had the OG conversations earlier in the year, the work with interreading, the coaches, it's all part of the same strategy to get at the same thing.
100%. But I feel like we're fighting the fire in our neighborhood and not looking at the overall picture.
Right. It may feel like it in this some of the data. It's definitely not in our strategy work, in our planning work, in our implementation work in the schools.
Dave?
So I hear you, Dennis, and yes, we don't need to go down a rabbit hole in the data, but like the reason for my asking on the FTEs is not to go, oh, well, this administrator spends, this much time in a PT and this, no, I have no interest in that. What my interest is doing, and this goes back to some of the conversations we had on the, I want to say AIMSWeb, it's not AIMSWeb, what's the UBE or what's the system?
The universal screener?
No, what's the system you're working on?
UDL.
EduPlan. Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Thank you for that.
You guys heard that? EduPlan.
I knew I was going to blank on that. So when we looked at EduPlan, the question was, should we pour more dollars into this sooner to try and get to a better result sooner? We didn't. We were on a good track with that. So the question here is, where we're spending the numbers and how much time is going into this, do we need to put more stuff to try and get ahead of it and be able to do it? So that's the reason I'm asking for these numbers, is to get a better sense. I have no interest in getting into the weeds and under the hood and figuring all that out, but we've had that discussion many times here, like, do we need to really focus on this sooner than later? And so that's what I'm trying to get to, is to know we spend X number of hours, that's great, but like, are we spending that time well? Could we give them tools where they can do that more efficiently or something? So that's what I'm trying to understand.
And just a reflection on that, as you all know, the platform where we house data for both IEPs and 504s has now changed to a state-owned platform. And so some of our ability to pull data and mine for information has adjusted. And so we would love to provide you a cohort comparison 5 years back But we're newly able to get some of this information. And so some of this is only the 1 year. And we're excited to be able to look at that now moving forward for multiple years to do that work, to be able to say, you know, are we seeing any trends that we need to be thinking about systematically or from a staffing perspective? But some of it, we just have the information that's being newly made available to us. So we're looking forward to not just providing lots and lots of data, but actually being able to establish trends that exist over time.
So one of the things that we've invested a significant amount of time in this year is looking at a data warehouse that will help us be more diagnostic about the data points that we're looking at so that they're responsive to meet the needs of the children in the classroom, so that we're looking at the data and matching the evidence-based strategies and interventions to that deficit area or when a child requires extension. So one of the things that is keeping me up at night right now is like, that's a huge lift in the school district, you know, learning a new data platform and making sure that we are implementing that in a way that's supportive, not overwhelming to teachers at the same time when we're implementing, you know, a new reading resource. So that's when you say like, what do we need? I think a focused attention on making sure that we're having a supported implementation and time to do that right. And one of the things that we're really focusing on with our professional learning with that platform is the idea of considering, you know, data literacy, so that we're, again, making better informed decisions using multiple data points, sharing those more frequently, more regularly with families, and making sure, again, that that kind of platform will help us, because sometimes we lose time with kids, not only through the year, but grade level to grade level. And you don't necessarily know, right? The new teacher receives the children and the new teacher wonders, what were the strategies that were previously attempted? And there hasn't maybe been electronic record keeping of that. So you lose that information. So when we think about efficiencies, I'm really hopeful that that data warehouse, we have evidence that that should really support our work in MTSS meetings and in PLC meetings. And that should drive some of the, how are we spending our time on the front end? That would be a front end way to spend time to improve outcomes for kids.
Thank you.
If that helps.
No, I get it. And I think Dr. Byrne spoke to it well. It's work in progress. There's different pieces, and that's why we have you guys leading.
But we'll be looking forward to sharing our learning about that data warehouse and how that data is being used. I envision very early parent universities about MTSS. We haven't planned them out yet, but I envision that kind of communication will be really important with our families, and at the Board of Education Curriculum Committee level and probably full board level, reports on how that's going. It's a multi-tiered approach. It's curriculum resources, it's the data warehouse, it's the coaches that we're bringing in, the relationship between coaches and interventionists. It's all of these things, but.
And also to that
exciting.
point, at the building level, so some of this is somewhat granular, but it gets even more granular when we start to look at the building level and grade level data and then break them apart by buildings. And that's some of the work that we've been doing in collaboration with the MTSS committees in those steering committee work processes, to think about what are our actual MTSS review structures and how are we looking at not just individual data, but grade level information, building level information, and thinking about how we support buildings, grade levels, teacher levels through that process.
And I would just say, Dennis, to ease your mind a little bit about overwhelming people with data, because when you hear all of this, it sounds like we are dumping tons of data on people, but we've got the tools now. And the key is for us to make it easily accessible and usable. So it isn't always that everyone gets all the same data. It's that they can easily access and use the data that they need for their students to be most effective in their work.
Katie and then Joanna.
Thank you. So Dennis, when you were asking your question about the classroom outcomes, and I think I might have heard your question slightly different than how Dr. Byrne responded to it, but it really resonated with me. And I actually think that like a great additional component to this presentation would be what is going on in our general education classrooms for our students. So even just, that you have a slide in here that talks about the number of services, right? And the co-taught classes. But I think it would be great to know about you know, of those cohort of students who have IEPs, how many of them are taking AP classes? Like, I'd love to talk a little bit about, you know, the twice exceptional component. I'd like to know, you know, how their GPAs are doing as well, right? And I think, you know, to your point, Amy, from the curriculum committee meetings, the data that like visual from MTSS that you were expecting, I think can be really exciting at looking at individual children over years to sort of see that, you know, like, look at the gains that have been made in math. But surely we would be remiss if the two of us did not say at this table that our special education students are general education students first. So leading with that in mind, I think that having some, like, pulling out some specific gen ed classroom data would be a great contrast.
Just on that note, I looked at last year's presentation did actually have a slide showing the students that I think had IEPs, but they got like a 3 or a 4 on AP. There were different standardized tests and showing the trends and how they were doing, which I think gets to what you might be talking about as well, Kate, yeah. Joanna.
This is on a different topic. I don't know if
there are other.
Okay. So just sort of when you're talking about communication and efficiencies and showing parents or, you know, communities data more frequently, so it's not like just a huge download all of a sudden, it reminded me about missed services. And I wanted to ask about what the current policy is and if you've thought about, I mean, so the last I heard was that it was every time you had 5 missed services, then the parent would get a note home. Is that still the policy or has it changed?
So it's consecutive services. It's consecutive services.
So it's 5 consecutive.
It's 5
services.
consecutive services.
Have we ever thought of sending home a note every time or having a place where parents can look up and see whether or not their student has, I just feel like this is a place of tension, a place that might lead to more PPTs, that if there was transparency, you know, every time from the get-go, it might diffuse some of the harder situations where parents are frustrated.
And well, 2 things happen. Some parents and a PPT does make a recommendation that they have a log, a weekly log that shows about missed services or services in terms of that were received, whether it was the teacher was absent, the student was absent, you know, it shows that. So there are some requests by parents for logs. And there are also opportunities where a letter goes home. For instance, we did not have an OT for months at Tokenique. A letter goes home explaining and apologizing someone resigned, and we're trying to fill it, and we finally were able to successfully fill it, actually thanks to a parent helping us with that. So I think, you know, parents are informed when that happens. But for an individual missed session, it typically is not a note that will go home because 2 things happen. One, the provider tries to make up the session, and then you have to have a makeup session also. And that is the first go-to. They try to do it. If a provider is at a PPT for an hour and they've missed 2 sessions, right, in that time, they try to make them up. Sometimes they bring other children to session, they do that. That said, I know it has been brought up, we really would welcome, if that does happen with any family or any parent where they're not informed, but your question would be, how do they know they're not informed?
Right.
So we ask the providers, in the secondary, usually there's either a communication every 2 weeks, either by a phone, you know, there's a phone with either the case manager or an email with the case manager. And in the elementary, we certainly can ask the providers to reach out to the parent by email or a call, just saying they missed a session. We can ask them to do that.
Yeah, I just think that would go along,
Yeah.
a small lift that would go a long way.
Yeah, and it might be required because there's a concern about that. And how do you know they did miss it if you're not
Yeah,
informed?
yeah.
We
Small
can-
children aren't good narrators.
We
right?
can ask our related service and case managers to do that. It's probably easier to do it via email than to make a phone call. But they can certainly do that. And they can also talk about if they're making up a session, when they plan on doing that, or they can just drop an email saying we were able to make up a session. Sometimes it's weeks later,
Right.
but just send a note saying that. So we can,
Just like outward transparency, I think would be great.
we can ask at our next elementary and secondary meetings to our administrators to do that.
Are there any other board? Yes, Dave.
We're doing general questions here. Sure. Scott, going back to John was asking earlier, just as a follow-up about the district data trend slide. And Shirley, you spoke for a bit on the reading and OG. But Scott, you had mentioned there were a number of different factors that can contribute to rates being different. I mean, we're not just ticking a box here on elements. These are factors. You have to weigh them. I didn't see in last year's slideshow, I had a chance to go back and look when we were talking, any discussion what those factors might be. Could you maybe speak to a few of the key ones just for purposes of this conversation?
Sure, and just to make sure I understand the question correctly, you're talking about factors that might contribute to a higher identification rate.
Yeah, that was the question, right, John?
Right.
Yes.
So consistency with eligibility determinations, the fidelity and research-based intervention processes that exist in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the referral structures that exist within tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, just local trends that could exist in a specific population related to something like anxiety, and other supports that could exist. So there could be a multitude of factors. What I was really representing and not representing in a way to say it's not something we should look at is just that the trend has existed for a long time, that Darien has been the highest. And so we can't necessarily go back and figure out why it was the highest to start. What we do is look at all those other factors. And so one of the key ones we're looking at right now is that that referral to special education process K-5 for academic reasons. And that's the work that we're doing together with curriculum instruction to try to improve our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 process and timelines so that we can, because the research shows, decrease referrals to special education that could have been inappropriate by improving the fidelity to those processes. So there are a multitude of factors, and that's kind of the one that we're targeting right now.
Thank you for the background. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Katie.
I would just piggyback on that with just a couple of other things that I think are helpful context. And one is that, we do have students who exit special education. There are definitely students who are in special education and younger grades and, kind of improve their skills and no longer need it, which is great. And then there are some students who will never exit, right? There are some classifications that are lifelong and they will always have a classification. One other piece, just I know that, with that slide with the percentages and Darien was up there and we're like, why are we higher, right? So we're at around 20%. I have to tell you, for me, I'm like, that's it. And, everyone knows that dyslexia has a special place in my heart, but it's widely considered that 1 in 5 people are dyslexic. So that alone is 20%. Now, that doesn't mean that every student in Darien that's dyslexic might have an IEP or not, but just a little piece of context also in terms of how to think about.
Are there other board questions? Seeing none, I thank you both again for this great presentation, and we'll look forward to continued results once you get your data. And I guess you're still in the midst of going through all of that, and then in conjunction with MTSS. Thank you. Thank you. We will move on now to consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Joanna, seconded by John. Just to review the consent agenda, we have approval of April 28th minutes, proposed changes to the 2026-27 district calendar, and the 27-28 district school calendar. Would anyone like to discuss anything on the consent agenda before we vote? So there's no discussion. All in favor of approving the consent agenda? That is unanimous. Thank you. And then we'll move on to follow-up action items. I had written down one request from Katie for the website to have some more information that's more accessible for special education and easier to find, including a special ed 101. I think that's a great idea with some of the background kind of information. And then also a request for a 504 presentation to the Board of Ed at a future point with the trends as well that we had done in the past years. Now we'll move on to public comment.
To participate in public comment, please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record, and note that you'll have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have no public comment at this time.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Sarah, seconded by John. All in favor?